So, pseudoskeptics, you have found your evolutionary niche, for sure. You have joined the balmy army of James Randi, and you have taken to his favorite sport, of anti-religious head-kicking, with gusto. It's a thrilling new life for you. You are relentless, all over the net, cyberbullying those idiot Christians, telling them to be more rational and scientific, like, say, you. Yes. And the bonuses, to do this delightful head-kicking sport, for James Randi, you only need a bully streak of cruelty, and a 51% pass from high school. Even better news is that the main subjects of debate with these Christian fools is two subjects you covered in school: Darwinian evolution, and the Big Bang. So you are already all trained up, because you scored 51% in science. Well, the Big Bang never happened. It's a myth like the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus, and you believed it, so who's the bunny? It's already explained in a previous Pseudoskeptic video, and many other YouTube videos. Now the second pillar of your school beliefs also crumbles. Eminent microbiologists below have explained that Darwinism was always wrong from day one. The critical paragraph excerpt is reproduced here. In advance, Darwinian vertical hegemony, simple inherited mutations explain everything. As per Dawkins, Darwin, and pseudoskeptics, for 150 years, how could modern biology have gone so badly off track? According to Lois, it is a simple tale of scientific complacency, that's putting it kindly. Evolutionary biology took its modern form in the early 20th century with the establishment of the genetic basis of inheritance, Mendel's genetics combined with Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection. Biologists refer to this as the modern synthesis, and it has been the basis for all subsequent developments in molecular biology and genetics. Lois believes that along the way biologists were seduced by their own success into thinking they had found the final truth about all evolution. Note the religious theme there. Headline: Darwinism has been trashed by an eminent evolutionist. Lois, writing in prestigious Science mag. The media is silent. Darwin wrong for 150 years. Just suppose that Darwin's ideas were only a part of the story of evolution. Suppose that a process he never wrote about, and never even imagined, has been controlling the evolution of life throughout most of the Earth's history. It may sound preposterous, but this is exactly what microbiologist Carl Lois and physicist Nigel Goldenfeld, both at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, believe. Darwin's explanation of evolution, they argue, even in its sophisticated modern form, applies only to a recent phase of life on Earth. We mustn't throw Darwin overboard completely. We gotta have some respect. At the root of this idea is overwhelming recent evidence for horizontal gene transfer, in which organisms acquire genetic material horizontally from other organisms around them, rather than vertically from their parents or ancestors. The donor organisms may not even be the same species. This mechanism is already known to play a huge role in the evolution of microbial genomes, but its consequences have hardly been explored. According to Lois and Goldenfeld, they are profound, and horizontal gene transfer alters the evolutionary process itself. Since microorganisms represented most of life on Earth, for most of the time that life has existed, billions of years, in fact, the most ancient and prevalent form of evolution probably wasn't Darwinian at all, Lois and Goldenfeld say. Strong claims, but others are taking them seriously. Their arguments make sense, and their conclusion is very important, says biologist Jan Zapp of York University in Toronto, Canada. The process of evolution just isn't what most evolutionary biologists think it is. Like your hero Dawkins, vertical hegemony, simple inherited mutations explain everything. As per Dawkins, Darwin, and pseudoskeptics, for 150 years, how could modern biology have gone so badly off track? According to Lois, it is a simple tale of scientific complacency, that's putting it nicely. Evolutionary biology took its modern form in the early 20th century with the establishment of the genetic basis of inheritance, Mendel's genetics combined with Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection. Biologists refer to this as the modern synthesis, and it has been the basis for all subsequent developments in molecular biology and genetics. Lois believes that along the way biologists were seduced by their own success into thinking they had found the final truth about all evolution. Note the religious theme there. Biology built up a facade of mathematics around the juxtaposition of Mendelian genetics with Darwinism, he says. And as a result it neglected to study the most important problem in science, the nature of the evolutionary process. In particular, he argues, nothing in the modern synthesis explains the most fundamental steps in early life, how evolution could have produced the genetic code, and the basic genetic machinery used by all organisms, especially the enzymes and structures involved in translating genetic information into proteins. Most biologists, following Francis Crick, simply supposed that these were uninformative accidents of history. That was a big mistake, says Lois, who has made his academic reputation proving the point. In the past few years, a host of genome studies have demonstrated that DNA flows readily between the chromosomes of microbes and the external world. Typically around 10% of the genes in many bacterial genomes seem to have been acquired from other organisms. In this way, though the proportion can be several times that, so an individual microbe may have access to the genes found in the entire microbial population around it, including those of other microbe species. It's natural to wonder if the very concept of an organism in isolation is still valid at this level, says Goldenfeld. Lateral thinking: this is all very different from evolution, as described by Darwin. Evolution will always be about change, as a result of some organisms being more successful at surviving than others. In the Darwinian model, evolutionary change occurs because individuals with genes associated with successful traits are more likely to pass these on to the next generation. In horizontal gene transfer, by contrast, change is not a function of the individual, or of changes from generation to generation, but of all the microbes able to share genetic material. Evolution takes place within a complex, dynamic system of many interacting parts, say Lois and Goldenfeld, and understanding it demands a detailed exploration of the self-organizing potential of such a system. On the basis of their studies, they argue that horizontal gene transfer had to be a dominant factor in the original form of evolution. Evidence for this lies in the genetic code, say Lois and Goldenfeld. Though it was discovered in the 1960s, no one had been able to explain how evolution could have made it so exquisitely tuned to resisting errors. Mutations happen in DNA coding all the time, and yet the proteins it produces often remain unaffected by these glitches. Darwinian evolution simply cannot explain how such a code could arise. But horizontal gene transfer can, say Lois and Goldenfeld. In 1991, geneticists David Haig and Lawrence Hurst at the University of Oxford went further, showing that the code's level of error tolerance is truly remarkable. They found that the actual code is around 1 in a million in terms of how good it is at error mitigation. The actual genetic code, says Goldenfeld, stands out like a sore thumb as being the best possible. That would seem to demand some evolutionary explanation. Yet, until now, no one has found one. The reason, say Lois and Goldenfeld, is that everyone has been thinking in terms of the wrong kind of evolution, that is simplistic high school Darwinism, working with Kalin Vetsagian, also at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Lois and Goldenfeld set up a virtual world in which they could rerun history multiple times and test the evolution of the genetic code under different conditions. Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, VOL 103, p. 10696. Starting with a random initial population of codes being used by different organisms, they first explored how the code might evolve in ordinary Darwinian evolution. While the ability of the code to withstand errors improves with time, they found that the results were inconsistent with the pattern we actually see in two ways. First, the code never became shared among all organisms. A number of distinct codes remained in use no matter how long the team ran their simulations. Second, in none of their runs did any of the codes evolve to reach the optimal structure of the actual code. With vertical Darwinian evolution, says Goldenfeld, we found that the code evolution gets stuck and does not find the true optimum. Horizontal is optimal. The results were very different when they allowed horizontal gene transfer between different organisms. Now, with advantageous genetic innovations able to flow horizontally across the entire system, the code readily discovered the overall optimal structure and came to be universal among all organisms. In some sense, says Lois, the genetic code is a fossil, or perhaps an echo of the origin of life. just as the cosmic microwave background is a sort of echo of the Big Bang. And its form points to a process very different from today's Darwinian evolution. For the researchers, the conclusion is inescapable. The genetic code must have arisen in an earlier evolutionary phase dominated by horizontal gene transfer. Early evolution may have proceeded through a series of stages before the Darwinian form emerged. We mustn't throw Darwin overboard completely. We gotta have some respect today. At least in multicellular organisms, Darwinian evolution is dominant. Not in humans, but we may still be in for some surprises. Most of life, the microbial world, is still strongly taking advantage of horizontal gene transfer. But we also know, from studies in the past year, that multicellular organisms do this too, says Goldenfeld. As more genomes are sequenced, ever more incongruous sequences of DNA are turning up. Comparisons of the genomes of various species including a frog, lizard, mouse, and bush baby, for example, indicate that one particular chunk of DNA found in each must have been acquired independently by horizontal gene transfer. Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, VOL 105, p. 17023. The importance of this for evolution has yet to be seriously considered. No doubt there will be resistance in some quarters, yet many biologists recognize that there must be a change in thinking if evolution is finally to be understood in a deep way. The microbial world holds the greatest biomass on Earth, says Sapp, but for most evolutionists, think Dawkins, it's a case of out of sight, out of mind. They tend to focus on visible plants and animals. Like the fanatical biologist Dawkins, invisible things don't exist, right? But microbes do. Dummy. If a paradigm shift is pending, Pace says it will be in good hands. I think Lois has done more for biology at large than any biologist in history, including Darwin, he says. There's a lot more to learn, and he's been interpreting the emerging story brilliantly. Repeating the key paragraph, Darwinian vertical hegemony, simple inherited mutations explain everything. As per Dawkins, Darwin, and pseudoskeptics, for 150 years, how could modern biology have gone so badly off track? According to Lois, it is a simple tale of scientific complacency, that's putting it kindly. Lois believes that along the way biologists were seduced by their own success, into thinking they had found the final truth about all evolution. Note the religious theme there, and pseudoskeptics were seduced also, weren't you? Just like Dawkins. And all biologists were wrong. For 150 years. So Big Bang never happened, and high school Darwinism never really did much. At all, if anything. Microscopic unseen agents did most of the work. And many more surprises still wait for us, they say. So, no layperson can seriously say they understand evolution. These two learned scientists say that science doesn't know. That definitely includes Randi pseudoskeptics. So there is no science basis whatsoever for pseudoskeptics to cyberbully, lecture/argue with Christians on the two big fairy tales. Just a happy Easter bunny, are you, pseudoskeptic, isn't a trich? Send in the clowns, don't bother, they're here. Of course we all know it's just an excuse to go head-kicking religious people. But deprived of your two main, rational, fairy tales you can only be irrational when confronting Christians. Oh, but you're already doing that? Suggestion: turn your agro-skepticism onto James Randi to figure out who he and you actually work for. A clue is to note the magician's distractions and misdirections. Demonizing harmless dowsing, harmless homeopathy, and harmless alternative medicine is odd. And to whose benefit? Well, big pharmaceutical companies are always trying to wipe out alternative medicine, and you know, Big Pharma, scientific, rational medicine, kills and injures 1.5 million Americans annually. Pseudoskeptics, pipering behind James Randi, are helping to cover that up. Is this too big for you? IG Farben, a pharmaceutical chemical giant in Germany, was credited with instigating and propagating the Nazification of Germany, and WW2. It included armies of street thugs, the brown shirts, remember? So, could Big Pharma today employ James Randi, Shermer, etc., and provide plausible deniability of such a connection through foundations to lead an army of online brown shirts, head-kicking people, forever trying to herd them into always buying scientific, rational, branded drugs and medicines,